Hi, my name is David Lopez, co-dean of Rutgers Law School in Newark, New Jersey, and this is The Power of Attorney. Today, I'm very honored to have with us Nicole Clark, a graduate of our beloved Rutgers Law School in 2011, who is also the co-founder of Trellis. And we're going to talk about what that is in a little bit. Nicole, glad to have you with us. How are you?
Doing well. So great to be here.
It's wonderful. So we were talking before that I've done a lot of interviews with our outstanding faculty, and this is my first foray out into our alumni network. But I found that what you're doing is so interesting that I wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to talk about it. So thank you for being, part of this experiment.
Absolutely. Really excited to be here.
So you graduated in 2011. What brought you to Rutgers Law School? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I did undergrad. I went to college early at 16, and then ultimately my degree was in journalism. And when I graduated, much like now, it was very difficult to figure out how to make a career out of journalism. And so I started working in admissions at a college and was just feeling a lack of satisfaction and knew that I wanted to continue on. And at that point, the economy was doing incredibly well. And I did sort of a cost benefit analysis, and law school felt like the right thing at that point. And so moved forward. I had one of my closest friends that was at Rutgers 1 year ahead of me. And so I really felt like I would have a community there. The tuition made sense. And so Rutgers was, also at that point, I think I had the idea in my mind that I wanted to be in big law. And Rutgers being so close to New York City, it was just an affordable option that I felt was competitive with many of the schools in New York for those large firms.
So how did we do? What was your experience?
I had an awesome experience at Rutgers. I came in, I was part of the minority student program, MSP. And that was, I'm a I'm a Caucasian woman, but that being said, I had grown up with lower socioeconomic status and definitely some obstacles, and it was really a welcoming place for me. I felt like I had community. The minority student program was hugely beneficial to me and my path. I went on to then tutor the students that were coming in for the newer classes in con law, and that was a really rewarding experience for me as well. So I generally really enjoyed my law school experience at Rutgers.
Yeah, I mean, the MSP program has been such a tremendous and landmark program in terms of providing opportunity and opening up doors. It sounds like it worked magic for you.
It definitely did. There's no question. I wouldn't even imagine what my law school experience would have been, one, at a different law school, and then two, without that program.
I know some of our listeners are probably saying, minority student program, Caucasian woman. Can you talk about what your understanding is with respect to what the MSP program tries to accomplish?
Yeah, I think it's about diversity overall. So I think that there are a lot of things that can be sort of a stand-in for inequities that people experience. So lack of economic status can almost be a stand-in for race in some cases. But generally, MSP isn't about, you have to be a specific race. It's simply, did you experience some type of diversity that you've had to overcome in your life generally? And that there's a welcoming place where people that didn't have some of the same opportunities that many people get can, basically have a support system, learn together, and be able to move forward and grow. So it was generally just a welcoming community.
Yeah, it's been a fantastic program, and it's really not only, I think, diversified the bar in New Jersey, but it's also opened doors for so many people. So I'm glad you were part of that program. You're from California?
Correct. Los Angeles originally.
So you sort of flipped the American trajectory on its head. You went east instead of going west.
Absolutely. I did. And I'll tell you, I love the East Coast. I think the people are great. It's a no nonsense community that I really, really appreciated.
Yeah, no, I did the same thing. I'm from Arizona, so I moved east also. So Rutgers was great, and you graduated with a Rutgers law degree, and you were set for life, right? What'd you do next?
Well, so this was 2011. So this was really sort of ground zero for the recession, which started to take place in 2008, which is when I started law school. And what ended up happening my year of graduation was that the year before me, everyone who had their sort of big law offers got deferred to when our start date would have been. There was hiring freezes across the board really at that point. And so it was a difficult time. It was a difficult time for my class in particular. I think a year or two later, large firms went back to, traditional OCI hiring, but our class really got left out. So I ended up at that point getting a position as an associate at a firm that did a lot of foreclosure and bankruptcy work, which was voluminous at that point. And so I was doing some of that and did that for a number of years, practicing in Massachusetts and Connecticut. I'm still barred in both states, but wasn't really fully satisfied, I think. So I went back home at that point, and decided I was going to, I moved back to California where I had some roots, and it was sort of a life transition for me at that point to figure out how I could have a career that was a little bit more meaningful for me. And so moved back to California, studied for the bar here. And at that point had a little one as well. So I studied for the bar with a newborn and ended up then sort of niching my career into primarily labor and employment. So a lot of class action, wage and hour work. And what really ended up happening for me was I was litigating just a lot at the state court level. Employment is entirely state codified, and there's just a ton of heavy discovery and emotionally charged work, and it's a heavily litigated area. And I found myself shocked that we just didn't have any information at the state trial court level. You'd get assigned your case and you'd get assigned a judge, and you would send around an email internally at your firm to say, does anyone have any intel on the judge? And it just blew my mind that we weren't utilizing data in making these really strategic decisions like, should you request assignment to a different judge in the short period of time that you have to make that decision? And we were using what I call anecdata, which were, anecdotes from a few people in the firm about cases which may or may not have any bearing on what you're doing, and were very biased. And so I really started to think about this idea of data in the law and how lawyers, historically really weren't utilizing data in the way that other industries were to make strategic decisions.
Why do you think that there wasn't already this kind of data-focused approach in the law? What do you think? Do you think there is something about the legal profession, or do you think it just hadn't caught up?
It's a good question. I actually think there's a variety of different things at play. I think on the one hand, you have an industry that is steeped in tradition and formality, and that is generally resistant to change altogether. And then you also have older lawyers that have been doing something a certain way and have been quite successful at it for their careers. And for them, it's, I have my trusty yellow pad, and why would I need to change something that's not broken? And then you also have legal technology companies that have, you started in the 1970s and are providing enormous value to their shareholders without really having to innovate. And so you don't have the incentive for those companies to innovate and provide new products to lawyers. And you have lawyers that aren't experiencing new technology and that have been trained that tradition, is necessary as a part of the profession. And also that everything is, I think there's an idea with lawyers that everything is fact specific. It's true to a certain extent. We cannot take the facts out of the scenario and have an understanding. But the idea that data can't help you interpret your own facts and tell a better story is not necessarily accurate. I actually think there's been a variety of things at play which have really kept law sort of a little bit behind in terms of embracing technology in the way that other industries have.
How long do you think this idea germinated before you actually did something about it?
I'd say for about 5 years. It was something that started early in the career, and then I was just, I thought, why is it this way? And I think for a large portion of that time, I thought in the way that other lawyers would have thought about it, which is, what are the tools that I have that can solve this problem? Okay, well, this judge just gave me a ruling. I'm going to save this ruling in case I'm ever in front of him again. and sort of started collecting, PDFs and not having the tools, the technology tools myself to be able to feel empowered. But when I was able to team up with really talented engineers, that's when this sort of sense of control where, hey, I can actually do something about this. I can create something and solve it for myself. And really Trellis as the initial was me creating my own silver bullets to make my life easier. Was how can I create a database that will help me have better results, give better information to partners, and give better advocate for my clients. So what we actually did was we started collecting data, and I used it in practice for over 2 years before I jumped to launch Trellis, because it was really important to me to validate this idea, to say that I am 100% sure that this data is valuable, will give me a competitive advantage. And if I knew that for me, I was going to feel confident that it was going to do that for other lawyers. But it was a big jump, right? We're trained to be risk averse, and jumping from law and from litigation practice was no question. It was scary. And so being able to validate the market and the idea and the data for a number of years, and I'll tell you what happened was I started winning. And my motion practice was just really, really successful for those couple of years. And so it gave me the courage to say, I've got something here. This is an incredible opportunity that I can help bring to other lawyers.
So what type of data are you talking about that you started to collect?
So we started collecting from the trial courts that I was appearing in most often. And that was the initial, let's see if this data will help me in practice. And so we started mining trial court data, meaning judicial rulings, docket information from some of the highest volume courts, because those happened to be the courts that I was appearing in most often. So at that time, I was in California, so Los Angeles and San Diego and San Francisco and Riverside, and sort of the largest counties, which make up a giant volume of litigation in the nation altogether. And then what we did initially was make it just searchable for me so that I could search my judge in a legal issue and really see thought analysis on how the judge thought about particular legal issues. And then I was able to tailor my motions to my judge's thought process. So that was the very initial stage of Trellis, was really collecting judicial rulings and docket information and making those searchable for me in my own practice.
How did you organize this data? At what point did you start coding it?
So from the very start, basically, I knew that I was not going to be capable of creating a database. That's not what my expertise was in. I was a domain expert in the way that litigators and what data litigators would find meaningful. But in terms of collecting the data and aggregating it, no, that's certainly my engineering team. So I had a technical co-founder, and I was lucky to have, there's a lot of a career that ends up being a mixture of hard work and luck. And in this case, I was really lucky to have some genius engineer software developer friends that I brought the idea to, and that did a ton of market research on their own to say, is it possible that the big players in this space aren't collecting this data, that there is all of this data out there at the trial court level that no one has really adequately aggregated and analyzed? And they saw the opportunity too. And so, what we do is basically it's all automated. So we mine the data from every separate county court. And that's something that needs to be emphasized here when we're talking about state trial court data. It is separate by county. So, Newark would be separate from all of the other counties. And in California, Los Angeles is separate from San Francisco, from San Diego, and they all host their data separately, maintain it separately. So on a very basic level, what we're doing is really creating a searchable interface where you can search across state trial courts to understand trend information about how certain litigation plays out. And then, of course, by having this data that no one else has structured and collected and analyzed, then we can do incredible analytics on top of it. But really, step one is acquiring this data, which has historically been separated and fragmented at every separate county court level.
Let me just go back, because I want to really get into the moment when you decided to leave the firm and launch your own business. But you said that you were already doing this when you were at the firm.
Correct.
But were you working with engineers at that point, or was this just something you were doing on your own?
So working with engineers at that point. So basically what happened was it was an idea that the general use of data and trial court data was the idea that percolated for a number of years.
Okay.
And then while I was at the firm, I teamed up with an engineer and had them start mining the data through code and bringing it in for me. And then I continued to use it on that. So I was really customer number one. And what happened was after my number of years of having a really successful motion practice, when I had the courage to jump, I also wanted to make sure that I was jumping when we had a really meaningful database, when we had a meaningful amount of data that could be statistically significant, where if I was going to be providing information, I would be confident. And that took a number of years as well to really collect and aggregate that amount of data. So that was the initial. When I first jumped, I jumped from my law firm and told them that I was leaving. I did not expect them to become a customer, but what ended up happening was I told them I was leaving and I was going to start this company, and they connected the fact that I had been winning with the fact that I had been using Trellis. And for them, that was light bulb moment. And they actually became customer number one. And what we did there was they actually gave us office space on site. And I had my engineers come in and work on site. And we really iterated the product with the attorneys at the firm with a direct feedback loop of, this is helpful. Can you make it do this? Can you make it do this? And that, I would say, in the early days of the product was transformative for us in making a product that was really targeted to the market's needs.
So when you left the firm, were you scared?
Oh, terrified. I will tell you, I was terrified. And particularly I was terrified because I had actually jumped around a few firms in my career. And so I had gone to one, I had moved across the country, and I had started at another. And I had done about a year or two at each firm. And I felt like for a number of years, I felt like there wasn't another option. Like my option was, if I wasn't happy at a particular firm, I had to go to another firm. And I didn't know really that there were other career options. And once that idea opened up, there was still this idea of the safety net. How will I go back to practicing? If you look at my resume and I've jumped from firm to firm and then, started a business, and then what firm will take me seriously when I don't have a long stint? And so I was really afraid that if I wasn't going to be able to be successful, I would have hurt my career in taking this chance. But for me, I think the risk reward scenario was so great at that point that I felt that it was ultimately a bigger risk for my career to not move forward with what I felt was this incredible opportunity that was just so obvious to me. I could see that someone was going to create this company. It was very obvious to me that it would exist within a number of years. And if it wasn't me to create it, it would be someone else. And so it was really that sort of compulsion that helped me to take the jump.
So what was your initial team of advisors? Did you put together a business plan, or did you just have the business plan in your brain? How did that work, just in terms of the formation of a business?
Sure. And that's a really good question, because I really did jump into a world that I didn't know much about at that point.
Yeah.
What we did was very early on, we joined a startup accelerator called Techstars, which is a very selective startup accelerator that we were blessed to get into. And that was huge in terms of having a group, a mentorship group, and a group of advisors, which had built thousands of startups that have gone on to be incredibly successful, some of the biggest names that you would know. And that also was a connection of a community of investors and advisors that really helped me to understand how to build the business in the early days. So I would say I heavily relied on mentors and guidance from people who had done this before, because I knew there was a lot that I did not know about running a business and starting a startup.
So did you have to go pitch the idea to them?
Absolutely. So we actually raised initially a friends and family round. So we gathered a little bit there, and then we joined Techstars. Techstars also was our first institutional investor.
Do you want to give a shout out to your co-founder?
Absolutely. So my co-founder is Alum Schwartz, who is a phenomenal, I just couldn't be, he also, in terms of advisor and guidance, he's a serial entrepreneur, has built multiple businesses. DocStock was a company that he built that he sold to Intuit. And so there's no question that when always pick people who are smarter than you. And that has helped me be incredibly successful. So I, I recommend that to everyone, to surround yourself with people that you know are smarter than you and things that you're not as great at.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. And so your co-founder was an engineer and not a lawyer, right?
Correct. Computer engineer. Yeah. Software engineer. Exactly.
Okay, wonderful. You did the pitch. You got in with a software accelerator. Just in case my mom doesn't know what a software accelerator is, do you want to? I mean,
Sure, a business. Yeah, absolutely, a business accelerator. So this is basically a company that takes nascent startups. So you're talking about, you have a founding team, you have a little bit of a product, but you are very early on in your journey, and they help you to accelerate your business. You've got a core product, you maybe have product market fit, but you need to grow and scale rapidly. And so they help you do that. They give you the guidance and the mentorship that it takes to scale a business rapidly, particularly with first-time founders that have not done this before. They also introduce you to a network of investors, of institutional investors that back early companies. So it's a really cohesive little group there.
Yeah, I'm sure the investment helped.
It's necessary depending on the business. There are some businesses that can grow bootstrapped. Very often, though, with software companies, it takes a lot of capital upfront to develop the product, and without institutional investment, there's no way you can actually do it. So in our case, that was the case, and we did need institutional investment.
So your initial product was focused on California practice. Is that right?
That's correct. So we started in California and mining the various courts in California. And we could go state by state for the very reason that lawyers are licensed to practice in a certain state. And so, if we're able to acquire the data that's helpful for them in their practice, we can take this market and then move on from there. And so initially California, and we recently rolled out a giant push for the company also in New York, Florida, and Texas, across their state trial courts as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, one of the questions I asked when we first started talking about having you on is, how this compares to the use of Westlaw in federal courts. So when I was a federal court practitioner, I would always do a search of the judge. I'd do a search of opposing counsel. I try to gather as much information as possible. Can you talk about really the differences in the products and how you've really taken it in many respects to a new level?
Absolutely. So really one of the things, and I think, Lexis and Westlaw, they do a great job. They do a great job at the Court of Appeals level. They do a great job with federal data. The one thing that has historically been really difficult to access is state trial court data. And that's for the very reason that this data is fragmented. With Court of Appeals data, it's a unified system that they can get in and then really publish their own reporters on. But with the state trial court data, every county court is really sort of the king of their own fiefdom in terms of housing and maintaining the data. And so what we had to do was go county by county and collect this data. And that's the reason that it's not easy to find. If you're appearing in state trial court, which a little note here is actually a 30-to-1 ratio. There are 30 cases filed in state trial court for every one filed in federal court. So it's really where all of the litigation is taking place, but it's the place that historically has been a black box where you can't figure out information about how your judge thinks about issues, about how your opposing counsel has litigated similar cases in the past. So it's historically been this black box, and really that's where we're different. We're opening up the black box and letting you search this information in really any way that you can think about it, whether it be you want to find, you're a particular party and all of the cases they've litigated on a particular topic and see, where in the case they've settled it and make strategic decisions all the way through. In the way that you could previously do that with Court of Appeals data and federal data, we're allowing users to do that at the state trial court level.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Talk a little bit about the growth of the company. Well, let me ask you a question before we talk about how the company's grown. Trellis, where did that come from?
So at my heart, I'm a gardener. I am someone who likes to grow things, period. And so the idea of Trellis was really a sort of an interconnected data set that practitioners could use to grow and support their practice. So data that would help them really grow and support their practice generally. And so that's where the idea for Trellis came.
Okay, now talk about how Trellis has grown since you started the business.
I mean, it's really wild to think about. If you think about it, it went from two people with an idea to now us being a venture-backed company with, around 20 employees in multiple states. It's certainly been a journey, and it's really, really exciting. But we've continued to really grow rapidly. One of the reasons that we have grown so well is we took a risk and we opened up our data to Google to be ingested so that attorneys could organically search and get on to our site. So if they Google their judge, if they Google opposing counsel, they end up in Trellis, and then from there they can see the product, they can determine whether it's going to be valuable for them and make a decision to purchase at that point. And so really opening up the sort of lines of distribution, which is one of the hardest things in growing a company in the legal space, is that it's very hard to get distribution into law firms in the first place. And so by allowing the users to sort of search and come to us and determine that the data was valuable, we were able to save a ton of money on marketing, and the users were able to see the value before purchasing. So it ended up really being the right decision for us.
Now, how did you build that relationship with Google to allow you to do this?
So this was all, again, shout outs to my co-founder, who had built a previous company on SEO, which is search engine optimization, and who knew very well sort of Google's algorithm and how to make sure that we rank higher and higher in search results in particular areas. So it's not something that you need a relationship directly with Google. Basically, what Google's algorithm does is it determines what data is valuable. So if you put a search in, then it gives you search results and it watches users' behavior. So if they open up the first listing, and they stay on it for a long period of time, that's a signal to Google that the data is valuable. If they jump off immediately, that's a signal that it's not valuable. And so their algorithm constantly optimizes to try to give the most valuable, the most relevant results to users. And the nice thing is, clearly from user behavior, they found that our data is valuable and they do stay on longer and they do want to keep digging in. And so that allows us to rank higher and higher in the results. So it's really sort of a virtuous circle there between us and Google.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, you've moved beyond California. Do you want to talk about your geographic expansion in terms of your product?
Absolutely. So, initially it was California, all of the state trial courts in California, they call them superior courts. We're now in New York, where of course that system is flipped on its head, and the Supreme Court is their state trial court system. We also just launched across state trial courts in Texas and Florida as well. So we're really taking the map of the nation by highest volume of litigation. Later on this year, we are rolling out in Illinois, Cook County, and then also Delaware Chancery Court for all of the business litigation. And then early in next year, we're coming for New Jersey as well. Don't worry, we're not forgetting you. So we'll be there in 2021.
Well, let's hope so, since the taxpayers paid for your education.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I won't forget you guys, I promise.
That's great. What are some of the other plans that you have coming up?
So, I can tell you in terms of the analytics and the way that we utilize that, really step one in terms of creating a fantastic and really valuable analytics product is you have to have good data, right? It's garbage in, garbage out is a well-known saying in technology. You have to have very strong data. And so we premise the original core goal of the business to be acquiring data very rapidly and structuring it and making sure that once we structure this data, now we can make meaning out of it and do analytics. So, our initial analytics have been judge analytics, and that basically is from the start of your case, you get a judge analytics report that tells you how your judge rules across all of their important pretrial motions. And then you can make some decisions about whether to request assignment to a different judge, or, what motions might be the most valuable, where you should spend your client's money. And then going forward, there are just so many analytics to come that we are just really starting to tap the surface of. We're this year also working on law firm analytics, where law firms will be able to see where are all of their cases, which take the longest, so they can make some business decisions for themselves about which are the cases that are going to be the most profitable, all the way down to what cases are they winning and losing, what motions are they winning and losing, how do they do before particular judges, and really also gain competitive insights on other firms as well, So that ultimately what happens when everyone has access to data is that you level the playing field and everyone can make better decisions. And at the core of really Trellis's mission is to democratize access to the law and to let everyone utilize data to make better decisions.
Can you talk about generally some of the broader trends in data analytics in the legal profession?
Sure.
I know it's moving very fast. So
It definitely is. And I think we're really at an inflection point right now in terms of the use of data and analytics in litigation and in law. Actually, ALM did a study recently, and it found that of the users that utilize litigation analytics right now, 90% feel that it makes them a better attorney. And so what we're going to see happen is this idea where now that the data is available, historically it wasn't available. So that, understandably there could be an excuse there of, well, the data wasn't available. Now the data is available. Technology has also come a long way. Now the technology is here. So now really the standard of care for lawyers is going to start to change in terms of what level of research you're required to do from the start of a case. Because if your opposing counsel has access to data, and this is data that's available and it's not cost prohibitive, then really, you need to be able to see the same thing. You can't have a unilateral access to data situation. And so I believe that the competitive nature of the industry altogether, as some lawyers start to embrace early and move their careers forward faster, the rest of the industry will get on board as well. And then, of course, with COVID, this has only been massively accelerated. I think lawyers that have historically been fearful of technology now have to embrace technology in order to adapt to the ever-changing situation. And this is just going to speed the adoption of technology and of litigation analytics altogether as the entire industry embraces digitization in a way that they have to in order to survive.
do you want to talk about how many states have adopted a duty of technological competence and what that really
Sure.
means to the future practice of law?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And so we've looked into the ABA model rules on it, and many states now it's part of your duty of competence to have a duty of competence in technology. And this is a vast majority of the states have adopted that. And really what the duty is that's codified in those sort of ABA model rules is the duty to be aware of technology and its benefits and risks and to employ it where it will be useful to your client, right? Where it's to your client's benefit. And so I think we're at a place now where even the state bars recognize that lawyers have to embrace technology. We cannot stick our heads in the sand and pretend like it doesn't exist and continue on our way. These are services that can ultimately help your client, help you practice more efficiently, more effectively, be more persuasive. And it's a lawyer's core duty to, at a minimum, understand what's out there, know what products are out there, and understand how they can be helpful and if they can be helpful in your practice, and to do that assessment. Is this something that will ultimately be an end benefit to my client? And now it's part of your duty of competence to really understand what's out there, both the risks and benefits of utilizing the technology in practice.
And as we're in a world where there, are obviously many unmet legal needs, and there's really, I think, a profound crisis in terms of access to lawyers, access to justice. Can you talk about some of the work that's being done to really fill that gap, to help individuals who are vulnerable and don't otherwise have access to lawyers? It sounds like some of the projects you're talking about might be suited for law firms, but how do you make sure that they're more broadly available to address some of these unmet legal needs?
It's a great question. So we do a variety of things. One, we give complimentary access to many public interest to law firm clinics as well. So that's one thing that we're trying. But in terms of other technology, I know some people that are doing some really great things. Paladin they're out of New York and they're close friends. We actually share some investors, and they are basically linking up law firms with folks that need pro bono services and creating a marketplace for that, where lawyers that are interested in helping actually can go to a place and get connected. And so we're making that connection easier, and technology is helping to facilitate that. So really, technology needs to be employed in order to address the giant gap in access to justice. And embracing technology is going to help us move faster. The other thing I would say, just in terms of Trellis and our Google search engine optimization, is we often have individuals that are representing themselves pro se come in and access the data and ask questions to us. And so just by opening up this data and making it more transparent, making the court systems more transparent from the start, where you don't have to know a case number and go to the court's website to find out any information, but instead you can look up a legal issue. Maybe you have a tenant issue, and you can look it up and you can search across the way other people have handled that tenant issue and gain some insights for the individual as to, can they handle this themselves? Is this something that they might need counsel for? And then if they do, there are many technology platforms out there that help to match individuals with less resources with attorneys to really benefit both sides. I think there are also attorneys that don't want the private law firm general, the idea of what we all thought a lawyer would be, but instead they want to be in charge of their own practice, and they want to create their own practice and serve communities that are more in need as well.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's really, really important stuff. What has the reaction been from some of the more traditional attorneys?
Sure. There's multiple types of pushback. There's the type of pushback of a law firm that's saying, hold on, you mean you want us to pay you for us to be more efficient? So just generally challenging the law firm billable hour model. Then there's the pushback on technology. And then there's the we've been successful, law is not a science, it's an art argument. And so I think those are the variety. And I think there's a variety of responses to each. So I'm curious which one you're most interested in.
Well, I don't know if I told you this, but I teach a seminar called Social Justice, AI, Data and Data Analytics. So
Nice.
we look at these issues from many different perspectives, and I'm really interested in issues of algorithmic justice and also really the intersection between big data mining and privacy. And so there's, a lot of really big issues, uncharted territory out there. I'm probably more in the third category, but one of the things that I'm going to start with is the whole notion of serendipity versus, the sort of business model of data mining and predictive analytics that really kind of treats behavior as predictable set of data points.
Sure.
So we always start out by talking about the dating sites, because I think the dating sites provide a glimpse into many of the issues of discrimination, many of the issues of data scraping, many of the issues of privacy. But it also provides, I think, an insight into the whole issue of serendipity. So I always ask my children if they think that I would have met their mother, my wife, of 30 years on a dating site. And they're like, no way. You guys would have never connected, right? You would have never connected because you would have said you wanted X, Y, and Z, and she would have said, and you would have never connected. So you sort of are in a realm of like not knowing what you don't know. And so I think with respect to, with respect to the use of data analytics in the practice of the law, and I always tell the students, don't be a data point. If you feel like going left, go right. Take the phone off, take off MapQuest, get lost, right? I'm a big believer in that.
I like that.
In terms of how it triggers ideas. And this is something as a legal educator that we have to think about now because everything's very structured with technology. But I think data analytics, I just think of one judge I had who, and he's a federal judge, gave me a really hard time on this case. And every time I was in court, I would get upbraided by this judge. And somebody who knew him, the old fashioned way of sharing information is like, don't worry about him. He has teenagers.
I love that.
And the teenagers are giving him a hard time. And then I think, 3 or 4 years later, I was in front of him again, and oh my God, he was such a prince.
That's too funny.
And so the whole notion that outcomes can be predicted, and that that a judge has certain patterns that may not be variable, seems to kind of fly in the face of saying, what you really need to do is put together a really good argument, and you need to be compelling. And you need to have a good written product and be the best you can be, instead of just sort of, making a prediction as to how your opponent's going to behave and how the judge is going to behave on a given issue. So I think is that the art versus science tradition?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, I think so. That's
So
definitely
that's me. Anything that will reduce billing rates and billables, I'm fine with that. And
glad for it.
obviously we've
Glad to
all
hear it.
learned that we can't be, we have to, be cautious about technology, but we can't be fearful of technology. So I'm more of the poet.
Oh, I love that, and it's an interesting thing here. I have a data company, I have a technology company, and I'm somewhere on a continuum between you and utilizing data, and I'm that way because of the way that I use data in my own practice. So we can say on the one hand that there are absolutely tendencies, right? We can look at the data, we can look at a judge, and we can tell you historically they tend to rule this way on a particular issue. But for me, we have two core parts of the product. We have the analytics product, and many companies are out there and they're just doing analytics. But for me, I knew that the analytics were not enough. It's not because the law is so much of an art, because there's so many fact sensitive scenarios. In this case, you have to have the context as well. You have to be able to actually see the judge's thought process. You have to be able to dig in and understand and then put that in the context of all of the other pieces that you have about your opposing counsel, about their client and the way their client has been sued in the past. So what I say is the analytics are piece one. They are one data point for you to think about your case and the way that you want to be strategic and litigate, but they're not the end all be all. Really, you need to continue to bring in information. So for me, what was the big game changer was not seeing, okay, my judge grants this motion, 42% of the time. Instead, it was digging into the way that the judge actually, his language in his rulings and decisions, or her, I should say, and really the way that they analyze, because that'll tell you more about the thought process than just the hard data. And for me, really, it's the combination of the two that you need to be really successful and strategic. It's not just analytics, and it's not just your judge's language. It's the combination of the two, and then putting it in the universe where you as the artist are still making the ultimate decision about knowing what your facts are, knowing your client, and learning as much as you can about the judge, about opposing counsel, about the opposing party. And with all of that information, then making strategic decisions. So it's not something that I feel that the computer can give you an output and that will be the right thing. You still need these arguments are so nuanced that you need a human that can help have all of these tools that help to give them more information and a more holistic picture. But at the end of the day, it's that human that really still has to go with their intuition to what is going to be the best way to advocate for the client.
Thank you. That was a wonderful answer. I think the poets and artists will feel reassured. Well, I know that we have different audiences, and so we're certainly very proud of you at Rutgers Law School for all you've done.
Thank you so much.
But to the extent that we have people considering going to law school or law students who are thinking about starting a business, do you want to give them any advice? What would you tell them?
I think the advice would be that I spent a long time in my career thinking that there was really only one way to do it, thinking that, private practice was the only way. And that's not to say that many people aren't very happy in that career. But what I would caution against is really just that sort of absolutist thinking of there's one way to do this career, and that law school and that degree really gives you only a singular set of options. And that's just not the case, particularly in starting this company. I meet people that got their JDs. It's such a broad variety of careers now that I think there's a bit of the leap of faith in going because you know that it's something that interests you. But beyond that, you don't need to have the answers yet. You don't know how your career is going to go. It's going to be a journey, and you'll have so many sort of forks in the road where you get to decide where it's going to go. And I just say stay open-minded. It was something that took me a long time to have the courage and to sort of open up to the idea that there was many possibilities out there that my law degree had provided me. And so I would urge folks to sort of jump to that conclusion a little earlier than I did.
Well, yeah, that's wonderful. And, it's pretty clear that you have worked hard and that you're imaginative and very intelligent. But, of course, we know that the Rutgers experience was essential to everything you've accomplished, right?
Absolutely integral, no question.
Good. Anything else I didn't ask that you want to talk about?
No, I think not. I really enjoyed the conversation. If anyone's interested in checking out Trellis, we're at trellis.law and see us there. But welcome to have anyone reach out if they have any specific questions, career questions, or interested in starting a business or startup. Happy to chat with any folks as well.
Thank you, Nicole. We really appreciate having you on. Best of luck with everything. Stay in contact, and we're very proud to have you as part of the Rutgers Law community.
Thank you so much, guys. It was a pleasure.
The Power of Attorney is produced by Rutgers Law School. With 2 locations minutes from Philadelphia and New York City, Rutgers Law offers the prestige and reputation of a large, nationally known university with a personal, small campus experience. Learn more about Rutgers Law by visiting law.rutgers.edu.